Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate being here very much. And of course, so excited and impressed that you have alums who are giving back for this public affairs lecture and memory of some professors, because of course that's part of what we do, is just love to teach. And so that's really cool. I want to thank Tobin, who's the director of the school and a Buckeye alum. So we're very proud of everything that Tobin has accomplished. And of course, I appreciate all of you being here. The talk is dedicated to my father, who instilled, I'm a first gen, instilled the love of education. And so I've pushed my own children and tell my students, you know, no one can ever take away that degree, whatever you get. And so I just wanted to say thank you for having me here. I'm going to talk today primarily about pluralism, both in the disciplinary sense, and so it's so applicable to be here where you now have a school of anthropology, sociology, and political science, but also across methods. And so I'm known more for my quantitative methods, but I think one thing that has made Ohio State special, and one reason I have stayed there, is we are very accepting across the breadth of qualitative and quantitative methods. I've sat in on qualitative methods classes of my colleagues, not sure I understood everything, but try, and really want to see our discipline of political science, but really all of the social sciences, be more accepting of the differences across methods and learning from each other. And I felt like it is becoming increasingly important as the high-end quantitative methods increases the requirements really to do AI, you know, artificial intelligence, machine learning. 5 years ago, I was working on a project where people are like, you're going to have to learn Python. And I'm like, no. Yeah. And I'm quantitative methods, and I still didn't want to. And so I feel like more than ever, team science is important, bringing different perspectives, whether it's from different social sciences or from methodologies, is really important. And the other thing I want to emphasize tonight is engaged scholarship. And one thing I see really valuable in the graduate students and undergraduate students that we're teaching is going into scholarship with the idea that they want their work to have impact. When I was in graduate school, it was all about really just publishing. Now it's, okay, if you're going to publish that, why is that important? How are you going to apply that? And a better appreciation, getting back and tying methods in a bit, how do you interact with the communities that you want to make a positive difference for, the society, community you live in? How are you going to make that difference and be cognizant of the population you're trying to help and not cause harm at the same time? So that's a little bit of the bigger picture overview. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the importance of promoting pluralism in political and social sciences tonight by a commitment to democratic principles, as well as encouraging civic engagement more broadly. So not just for scholars, but back to our communities and civic engagement. Specifically exploring the idea of engaged pluralism, which I previewed a bit, but this entails active interaction, debate, and learning. And so one of my colleagues, Mike Neblo, takes town halls with members of Congress. He's a democratic theorist, but he's trying to get even the theory into practice. And so this really does involve engagement, debate, listening to others, seeing where they're coming from, and not being at separate tables. And I would say really until recently, I would say the last 5 years, it was more of a tolerance perspective. So whether we're talking about disciplines, being in the community, or methodology, it was like, well, I won't, you know, downgrade you if you don't downgrade me. So it was tolerance and kind of running in parallel paths. And I don't think that's good enough. And in fact, back to this you know, quantitative end of AI and machine learning, when you look across disciplines, I see some disciplines rather than engagement as kind of running in parallel tracks. Again, this tolerance idea, or even just a complete rejection. And there's been leaders and different disciplinary scholars across disciplines who say that and what's happening. So we're really trying to push this idea of pausing and looking at how we can do this together. So Craig Parsons talks about engaged pluralism as meaning retooling multiple epistemologies into shared, broadened, substantively inclusive epistemologies in which we recognize valid knowledge-generating potential of methods previously dismissed or at least overlooked. My assumption in arguing for engaged contributions is grounded in a shared commitment to finding truth, to human rights and democracy and supporting the rule of law. What I'm not going to do today's talk is to address the ways in which political or social scientists or other disciplinary experts could use their expertise to actually undermine human rights, democracy, or the rule of law, which is a meaty subject deserving of its own talk, but not one that I'm going to touch on. Instead, I'm going to talk about engaged pluralism and argue individuals need to undertake this challenge for a healthy, vibrant, disciplinary future and for a democracy that thrives. Kind of going back to the idea of needing more PhDs in the social sciences rather than less. Even just a decade ago, there's been calls in the Chronicle of Higher Ed and other places about having less PhDs due to less academic jobs. I would argue instead what we need to do, and I'll touch on this as well, is help students get those jobs in career diversity. So if academia is not what they want for a host of factors, lifestyle, where they want to live, et cetera, that we help them get jobs in government, nonprofits, and industry, that we need more PhDs in the social sciences, not less right now. Okay, so I'm consciously extending this term engagement to apply not only an understanding of subdisciplines, of different grounds of knowledge, but also addressing research needs of society. So I think the problems facing our nation, our world are formidable. There are traditional problems like war, corruption, international conflict, nuclear proliferation, brutal authoritarianism, the menace of some new technology, racism, and social injustice, just to name a few. On top of these realities, of course, there's global climate change with deadly implications for health, habitat, and much more, threatening really the very existence of the world we know. And many of these problems, we actually have scientific answers, but it's the social or the political that needs addressed. So we know a lot about how to fix climate change, but it has become a political issue, or we know a lot about vaccine hesitancy, but it's a social science problem. Individuals, groups, states, and nations don't agree on what the problems are in many cases, much less what can be done about them. At the same time, confidence in our democracy and in government in general, both here and abroad, is flagging. And so that's another important issue that social scientists need to address. As citizens, every single person in this room need not be reminded of this situation, and doubtless most of us, vote, contribute to causes, and volunteer in our communities, but I'm seeking much more both from myself and from you in this talk. Okay, so what does social science and political science have to offer in solving public problems? My answer for this question at the broadest level is that for many challenges facing the world today, the underlying science and the technical solutions are becoming better understood. Instead, the primary obstacle is actually connecting the solutions to the political, social, economic, and behavioral environment that we inhabit. So this connection is provided by social science. So for an example, if we look at international relations scholars and economists, nuclear proliferation, yes, ominously is back on the world's agenda, but for 70 years, catastrophic nuclear war had been forestalled. And I have no doubt that scholarship, teaching, and training public servants have contributed to this. So that's just one example. Serving as a link between technical solutions and the political, social, economic, and behavioral environment then is step one, in my opinion. Taking our scholarship further to civic engagement is step two. And what I mean is moving our research to action, where we develop scientifically sound solutions to address these societal challenges, especially in the realms of government and in public life. Civic engagement increases both the usefulness and the necessity of political science to the world. Many social scientists, though not all, are uniquely suited to translating the scientific and the technical solutions for general understanding and for the action needed for equitable societal change. And indeed, talking to the graduate students today in the department, I think does nothing but add additional hope to that and their ability to look at and translate and engage and be so articulate. Skip Lupia, a friend and former head of the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences of the National Science Foundation, has a unique answer to why social science? Like, why should we do social science? This is something that AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, puts out about once a month, a column on why social science. And he answers that it's a form of service, that improves the quality of life for people around the world. And so that's part of his argument about why there should be more funding for the social sciences, is because it's a form of service to the world. He emphasizes communicating the value of social science, which I think is actually something every social scientist has a duty to do, okay? He says improved communication, transparency, and engagement can give people new reasons to support the social sciences and give social scientists new opportunities to serve. So this whole idea of civic engagement means that as social scientists, we can go out and serve as well. However, not all is well to social sciences, as a cursory reading of Skip's work might suggest. To me, teaching and service guides our students, our universities, and our society. While research still aids and guides society, it's less direct than teaching and service. To talk about our work in research as service, both explicitly and explicitly, is also a change to the whole tenure system and the promotion at the universities, where we're starting to see universities reward engaged scholarship. So it won't necessarily be a number that we can count, it won't necessarily be a journal article, but also amplifies the whole impact. And so starting to see faculty work on changing and rewarding engaged scholarship, I think, is also really important. Okay. In terms of the value of social science, fortunately, many organizations are already working on trying to communicate the value of science to colleagues in different areas in the public, and I'd say facilitating and magnifying the impact. One of them is the Consortium for Social Science Association. One example that faculty can get involved in is they have a day or two, actually, where you go, they help train you and you lobby your member of Congress for funding for social science, and do a lot to try to communicate the value of social science. Something I actually think the economists and sociologists have done better than political scientists in general. Another one is the Network for Advancing and Evaluating the Societal Impact of Science. So that's also another valuable organization. But as individual social scientists, I think we are also called to do this as well, and as informed citizens. So civic engagement is an area in which scholars have made significant strides. It's a central part of involvement and demonstrates the value of social science both to society, but also we have to remember to our students, you know, what we're doing with the things that we put on our syllabi and value. Closer working relationships with the media is another way to go about this. So most of our universities are good at helping us translate our work and getting out the conversation, for example, of amplifying the work that we're trying to do, but also making sure we make those connections then to colleagues that have gone on to work in government, industry, and nonprofits are an essential part as well. Okay. There are many examples of past and current efforts to communicate the value of social and political science. I'm going to highlight a few of these. The first one is an organization called ICER, and this is something that faculty can apply to, and it's through the American Political Science Association, but founded by the Ivy, or funded by the Ivy Foundation. And basically it goes and trains social and political scientists about how to do engaged scholarship. So talking a little bit about their mission, I'm going to read what they say. Scholars in many disciplines are grappling with how to produce rigorous scholarship that addresses significant societal changes in collaboration with communities, organizations, and agencies. So ICER strives to learn from those working outside academia to benefit insights, all kinds of groups and institutions, and give back to the communities rather than extract value from the communities we're studying. Although political scientists offer models of excellence to civically engaged research, relevant methods and strategies are not yet widely taught in our graduate programs, so ICER tries to fulfill that. So it brings graduate students for training, but also faculty who might want to go back and learn. ICER also fits nicely with engaged pluralism by enhancing partnerships beyond the academy, and thus hopefully multiplying the impact of social and political science as well. And second, by appreciating, understanding, and using a variety of methodologies and methods. And I'm using both of those terms. So methods, I think more about the statistics or the focus groups, how you're doing things, whereas the methodologies are more kind of what's driving the research and the approach that you bring. The second one that I'm pointing to is a task force on election assistance, and having served most recently as president of the American Political Science Association, this was not a standing committee with our Society or association, and felt like it was really important because we know the elections are happening every 2 and 4 years, but it seemed like each time the election rolled around, we were gearing up, trying to bring political scientists to bear to help provide, commentary, poll workers, whatever it might be. So this is now a standing committee or task force on election assistance. The third one I'm really excited about, Ben Campbell is an SIU undergrad who came to graduate school with me and one of the top students I ever worked with in graduate school. And he, of course, brags about his time here at SIU and the amazing teaching that happened here. And together we did a role analysis using a particular network model to look at interest groups. And what was important and what we did was trying to look at who gets what, when, and how, kind of a basic question in political science on distributive politics. And we looked at how effective interest groups in the environmental policy space were given that, which groups were central, which ones were communicators and tied together. So I think our research, once we get into this mode of thinking about how do we have engaged scholarship, we can do that from some of the most esoteric research, and that's one example from what I did with Ben. The fourth one example really is from President Barack Obama at the time established the Presidential Social and Behavioral Science Team. And this team was charged to develop and use social science research to create policy solutions. And many of our friends and colleagues in academia were tasked with joining President Obama, and it's continued in the White House. So it's pretty exciting, I think, to have this recognition of social science at this highest level. And their charge was to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of government, and said that behavioral science insights can support a range of national priorities, including helping workers find better jobs, enabling Americans to lead longer, healthier lives, improving access to educational opportunities, and support for success in school, and accelerating the transition to a low-carbon economy. So that was just some of the tasks that they worked on. One example of things that they did was direct enrollment in school lunch programs. So in psychology, they would tell us that opt-out has a much higher participation rate than opt-in. And so they did that for school lunch programs and made a huge difference in getting more children who qualified school lunches. Okay, great. All right, so is this the golden age of social and political science? I would argue that it was. Kenneth Pruitt argues that there are these golden opportunities out there. And for those of you who aren't social scientists, maybe this will motivate you all to be social scientists in your everyday lives. I think that this quote from Pruitt is nice. It says, "Not since the birth of the late 19th century has social science been faced with such a massive opportunity for demonstrating the value of the social scientists," and says that the next steps, or I think that the next steps, are pushing human dimensions of so many of these challenges that we would call wicked problems, et cetera. So this will require not just academics employed in our colleges and universities, but trained social scientists who are working in a variety of professions, and for those who are working on the ground in the community to bring these problems to the forefront. Okay, so I think we could very well be in the golden age of social science, and I would say two important factors are driving that. First is just the diverse and important questions that can be asked, and the second really is the ability to engage with each other and use all of the now massive data sets and data on human dimensions that we've never had before. Civic engagement also defines an aspect, I think, of this new, quote, golden age, as the much discussed book called Making Social Science Matter outlines. Our research needs to help address people's problems that they see as important and they face. There are certainly still significant challenges to this golden age when considering the inability to adequately leverage social science insights to address pressing problems, perhaps these wicked problems like climate change or vaccine hesitancy or social justice, but solutions exist in the willingness of many of the public to explore does not. And so that's why I think the engagement with our communities is so important. Okay. I do think it's very easy to argue, even if you disagree that it's a golden time for social science, certainly a golden time for methodologies and methods. Okay, and so why do I say that? So the explosion of data on human behavior is the obvious first point. We track when people start and stop or stuck at a stoplight, the cameras on police, et cetera. There's just so much more data on what we are doing than there ever have before. So more data is collected. It's more linked and networked than ever before. There, for example, over 150 surveys and country context data is now available. So your ability to bring in, quote, administrative data with survey data is really important. If we go back in time, there are these new data collection methods. We can use these new data collection methods to go back in time. So, for example, we can look at amicus curiae briefs since the very first one written in the United States, and we can gather that data, mine it with large language models to see what's happening. Okay, let's see. I think if we think about the kind of data that's collected as well, the explosion of text data and what we can do with that, or video and image, and being able to analyze the video data and look for nuances or even tone. There's a wonderful article that looked at the arguments made at the Supreme Court and the questions asked just based on the tone, because we don't have video of the Supreme Court justices yet in their work. All right, so our analytic methods, of course, have expanded with artificial intelligence and machine learning, as well as the data. And we can trace and model human interaction better than ever before with the methods and extensions such as network analysis and some of my favorites, time series or survival analysis, things that, spatial modeling, that capture context and time, which is something I'll refer to as well. But these methods that allow you to look at dynamics and change, I think, are really important. In addition, of course, we have vast increase in computing capacity, of which none of this would be possible otherwise. And then finally, development of diverse teams is another factor, I think, in leading to the golden age here. So Page lays out, Scott Page, that these diverse teams leverage for the benefit of all, building diverse teams across backgrounds, whether it's gender, sex, race, ethnicity, first gen, religion, ideology, partisanship, cultures, is a distinct advantage to get alternative purchase on a problem. Second, a diverse team in the golden age of methods and methodology, now within political science and social science, likewise provides a distinct advantage. So we're also crossing methods and methodologies. And then finally, going across disciplines, which, again, your school is now able to do, is a distinct advantage because of that interaction and looking at problems from alternative advantage points. Almost all disciplines are now reaching out and collaborating, so computer scientists with social sciences, engineering, physics, et cetera. It is still hard, but I think worth it, crossing those disciplinary boundaries and getting past the way that different scholars talk about these issues. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about career diversity because I think it's also an aspect that needs support. And I think it's important for the health and future of our discipline and for the impactful production of knowledge. So we have a new committee at the American Political Science Association, but I think it's hitting all of the social sciences to provide better support for those who want to go into government, nonprofits, and industry. And it's an issue I've cared about my entire career, partly, I think, being first gen, who, my dad's dream was to see me go to college, and then education's always been highly valued. And I think there's so many different things that we can do, not just be an academic. It's a wonderful career. It's a great career for me, but that doesn't mean it's a great career for everyone. So for the same reason, serving as a mentor has always been indispensable part of myself as well. But, people might have where they want to live, family concerns, personal work habits. We talked a little bit today with graduate students about work-life balance, of which everybody needs something to balance work to be able to do the best thing you can. And even just your drive for your mission of what you're doing. So I think as teachers and scholars, we need to be sure to support students in whichever of these avenues they want to do, as we certainly need the contributions from PhDs to make the world better, our undergraduates and graduate students. And so I think we need, more people thinking about around the world participating in policy making and in how to make a difference in their community, both for understanding the world, for engagement, for better public policy, the production of knowledge, and we have to help find careers for people across all of these. In other words, we need a bigger table, not a smaller table, and to be bringing everyone in. And by talking to our colleagues who are in these other areas, we can ask better questions in the first place. All right. So I think one way to put this is, what is our mission and vision for the social sciences, and thus for society? And my answer is inclusive, diverse, non-hierarchical, and engaged. Okay. It's certainly a unique and exciting time to be a social scientist or a political scientist, and I say that genuinely because my daughter is graduating from college in the social sciences this year, so I'm excited about that. I do think the world is recognizing the value of social science more than they have in the past, so the value added. There's an increased recognition of the indispensability of social science across fields, meaning industry, government, nonprofits. There's more team science, which I think they're bringing more social sciences in. So if you look at a lot of the grant calls now for AI and machine learning, there is a specific recognition that the social sciences have been left out. So they have, artificial intelligence in health, artificial intelligence in precision agriculture, et cetera. But what you're seeing is there aren't enough social scientists. There's certainly some who are involved, but there aren't enough social scientists involved in the kind of the cutting edge machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think that the more diverse teams we have, they provide an ideal mix of these opportunities. So I'm more confident that one scholarship will make a difference if we increase the pathways for collaboration and civic engagement. And I think it adds to the excitement too. So a lot of the undergraduates that I teach want to be able to make a difference in what they're doing. I have about 14 undergrads I work with in, quote, a lab, and about half are from computer science, and they are over in the social scientists because they want data for good. They want data that makes a difference. And so that's always heartening, and one of the best parts about being a faculty member, right? All the enthusiasm and hope and promise of working with the students who are coming to our institutions. As scientists, we study people, socially, politically, economically, and societies across space and time. In short, we want to leverage the context that we're studying. And these comparisons, I think, clarify policy impact when we can look at change over time or dynamics. And the context contributes to this golden age of social sciences, I would argue. Yet there's untapped potential to do more and to have more policy impact, and really those limits are kind of set by our imaginations, and again, another reason why these diverse teams help expand our imaginations. So I would say to those who might be in the audience considering or contemplating a career in the social sciences, or have recently launched their career in social science, or even those who have been at it quite a while, like myself, but maybe need a bolt of inspiration as of late, I would say, be bold and pick those questions that inspire you. That was another thing that came up in one of the graduate students I was talking to today was, how do you pick a topic? You've got to have things that really drive you inside, and that will make a difference. It's a problem you can stick with for a long time, and that you care about what that answer is. So which questions keep you up at night is another way to put that. Which ones do you know will make a difference in the way we understand a social, political, or economic problem? Tobin would tell us it's religion and politics, and with a couple other scholars who are here. Or in the way life or lives could be changed around this problem. And then that's how you know which questions to pursue. So as we join more diverse and interdisciplinary teams, I think our methodologies and methods, and especially our theories, illuminate the value of scholarship even more. So interdisciplinary engagement, I think, leads to this vast improvement, again, even though it's very hard, I think, or harder to do than just staying in our, quote, own lane. All right, so what are some of the threats to this golden age of methods and methodology? And I think the threats are actually interconnected. So the barriers to crossing different methodology and methods, which is a threat, is deepened by dogmatic loyalty to a particular methodology, which is a second threat. So such dogmatism holds back advancements in scholarship, and we're all familiar with the concern that the dominant approach is closing out possibilities for other methodologies or methods, shutting down discussion in departments or out in the community. However, dogmatism, even with a non-dominant tradition, creates a barrier and I think stifles research and teaching and what we do in our classrooms. Third, I think specialization is another threat. So the specialization becomes necessary for knowledge. We dive in really deep in our dissertations, but nevertheless then can block leaps of understanding that really are only possible if we build these bridges. I think the people who can cross over for bridges, whether it's methods, methodologies, disciplines, subdisciplines, are actually the most valuable in our communities and in our research teams. One way to particularly break down the fragmentation is by welcoming people and approaches that we haven't been exposed to, right, or that has been excluded, even if excluded by accident. So rather than closing off alternative methods and ways of seeing the world, embracing the new sites they can offer kind of counters one of the threats to this golden age. So it's the interaction that is in a crowded intersection that I think is most important. So every field, specialization, methodology have something to offer, but our receptivity to that can make a difference on how far that goes. Pressing right now, I think, is again this rapid change at the end of quantitative methods, that is big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and those scholars who are learning how to exploit those developments can help lower the barriers then to understanding. And so how can that happen? Well, I think by leading workshops, right, for the benefit of all who want to engage, by inviting undergraduates or graduate students or colleagues in different subfields with different perspectives to participate in your research is another way to lower some of those barriers. The benefits of such collaboration, I think, accrue to both the person that might be teaching those methods, but also to the person who is receiving them, and because your research is going to be sharpened. It's been fascinating to see the political science students try to explain the value to the computer sciences and vice versa. We had one undergraduate who did a thesis looking at congressional speech data, so we're trying to figure out which members of Congress are talking about the same thing, if they're talking about it in the same way, so sort of the sentiment. And the computer science student said, the Rules Committee is really important. We went, yeah, the Rules Committee is really important in Congress. So this give and take between experts across fields becomes really important. All right. So another, I think, benefit is eliminating bias. By being able to bring in the diverse teams, we can lower the bias that's there. And again, the translators and the connectors become very important in our research and in our departments. So I think, finally, a recognition of the benefits of broader collaboration could stave off the idea that one approach or one method is the best way to grow. True, sincere, difficult engagement is what's needed. And we can choose empty pluralism by excluding the scholarship of others when it's not like our own, or we can choose this engaged pluralism and discussion. And I found that was one of the best benefits of serving in the American Political Science Association, was the diversity of scholarship that I learned about. All right. Okay. In terms of some of the golden possibilities, I'm going to return to a discussion of time, space, context, and dynamics. So whereas many have seen disconnects across quantitative and qualitative methods, or even across methodologies, I think a concern for time and context is actually a bridge between scholars of different methods. For example, qualitative research reminds us upfront about the role of time and context. They place it in a time, they place it in a context. Similarly, interpretive approaches have a basic premise of studying socio-history and what's going on in that context. So it's important to all of us, research and teachers, to take the engagement across methods seriously and to incorporate the best we can the insights from our various collaborators. My own work is always centered on time and context, having been a student who looked at approaches that would look at longitudinal methods and independence of our observations, namely time series, event history, and then network analysis. So it may not be a surprise to those who know me well that leveraging change and dynamics has been important and something I would push. So how do we study the vast array of interesting and vital social questions that arrive from this perspective, and how do we study questions that are complex and intertwined, indeed these questions that are wicked? And I would say it's dynamic analysis, which is inherently about time and change, and we can look closer at interconnections and interdependence. A focus that also turned my attention is to the study of heterogeneity. So this allows us to look at difference when we focus on heterogeneity, which is a more universal principle for scholars regardless of methodological orientation. In short, trying to look at the causes and consequences of change and what makes something different. And under heterogeneity, we try to capture everything we can in the model, but if we can't get everything measured exactly right, we also have statistical fixes that account for the heterogeneity of things that are unmeasured, unmeasurable, or unimagined, that might be about culture, for example. It's a very slippery concept to be able to incorporate. All right, so some of the other examples that I think exemplify the study of looking at change and dynamics include looking at spatial data panel. Darmafal leverages some of this to examine whether deunification diffuses from one state to neighboring states. Moore and Reeves, who looks at 2.6 million GPS records to gain dynamic measures of people, places, and institutions and what they encounter in their daily lives. Others who use a perspective that explore time within democratic theory and practice, or looking at history for perspective on our recent pandemics, and looking at the changing cultural meaning of words. So again, anything that incorporates this change, I think, can add additional leverage for us. Okay, an elaboration of the answer in terms of engaged methodological pluralism. The importance of engaged methodological pluralism is centered around the benefit of a more open, rigorous, and I would say contentious science. Methodological pluralism adds rigor through the give and take of engagement that helps us refine and clarify our arguments, and also because we examine research from new angles and via a new perspective of diversity. All three of these paths lead to rigor, which results in better solutions to the problems that we're studying, and collaboration across our methods, across the social sciences and really across the disciplines to get at engaged pluralism, and again, a bridging across the competency difficulty gap, I would say. So as we stretch ourselves into broader and deeper understanding then of human phenomena through this engagement. Engaged pluralism also means the pressures towards fragmentation can be reduced. So compared to other social science disciplines, I would argue that political science has historically been more accepting and pluralistic across methods. In a recent decades, this tolerance of differences in methodology and methods has been characterized by the orientation of most political scientists. So I think we have to push ourselves a bit more because that's been referred to as empty pluralism, when we're just sort of tolerating what the other people are doing. Instead, my vision of engaged pluralism also sees connectors. These are the scholars who could translate across fields and across problems that they're interested in, across research approaches, and who makes accessible their scholarship. So I would urge everyone who's out there writing, doing dissertations, et cetera, using language that translates why your problem is important beyond the small group that knows all of your lingo. Of course, due to the division of labor, we'll always have specialists, but it's the connectors that are critical, and even if unrecognized as often as they should be, that makes a difference in advancing scholarship the most. Social and political scientists are answering the call for a world characterized by these complex issues that don't recognize methodological, disciplinary, or geographic boundaries, and continuing to do so requires agility and flexibility and openness when we hear talks and scholarship that is different from our own. With specialization, certainly equally as important as today, problem solving really demands these diverse teams, and diversity in as many ways that you can think about it, Scott Page has shown, leads to these better outcomes. As scholars, I hope we can always invite the messy, the inconclusive, the hard to interpret, right along with the precise, the clear, the statistically significant, the parsimonious at the same table. As a society, we benefit from a discipline that translates or transcends these boundaries. To return to the critical question about engaged pluralism and what it adds, I would say it adds rigor. So Parsons, again, advances our thinking. He says a key feature that distinguishes rigorous scholarship pursuits from others, whether unscholarly or less rigorous, is an effort to engage with the widest possible or plausible alternative answers to a question. So it follows that our main reason to push engagement in the widest range of diverse perspectives is not to show respect for others, though that's worthy too, but because our own pursuit of rigorous thinking demands it. So this engagement, I think, pushes us to be more precise, more rigorous in what we're defining, how we're measuring, et cetera, in our own research. So communication engagement in our wonderfully methodologically pluralistic social sciences is a key next step. After scholarly exchange, I think civic engagement follows for many. All right, so some lessons imparted and carried forward from social and political science. First, tolerance is not enough, so hopefully, this kind of parallel, you do your thing, I'll do mine, I think leaves us very much short. The centrality of discussion to overcome differences, and I think we're at this critical inflection point, again, of trying to make sure that we engage and appreciate the pluralism rather than, a breakdown of disciplines that say, this is only going to be a quant department, this is only going to be a qualitative department. Civic engagement, I see a lot of hope in that. I think more and more scholars who are trained embrace civic engagement and takes us back to core concerns about democracy and inequality and what kind of society and life that gives us. And then fourth, we're very lucky as scholars and teachers to be able to put this centerpiece in our lives and really kind of help pass that on to our students. All right. A path forward, and so a commitments to fulfill two primary themes encapsulate my view on where we should be headed. First is the pursuit of engaged methodological pluralism and our training of our students at all levels, graduate and undergraduate, and in the future research and teaching to all of us as individuals. Second, there's supporting democratic principles and engagement, civic engagement, and I would point to things that we can all work to do and be able to put out there as democratic citizens and how we volunteer, get involved in elections and our teaching. And the work is fundamental to highlighting scholarship, nonpartisan civic engagement. And so I'm very optimistic about the transformative power of this new Election Assistance Commission, just as one example that is now up and going. I think we also need to be more ambitious in making democracy work better for everyone and enable people to solve the formidable problems mentioned in the introduction. And political and social scientists can work together with civil society and others at scale to provide people with the confidence, the skills, the knowledge. A lot of our teaching happens outside the classroom too, with maybe op-eds or involvement in our communities and how we spend our time outside of the classroom. And all of this matters. Our higher education institutions are centers for learning and civic values and have been and always most likely will be. And so being able to embrace that mission in what we do, I think, is really important. So I'm confident that pursuing the aspirations laid out will advance, and in doing so lead us to meeting and extending the challenge about understanding who we are and who other people are. So a challenge put out by Sid Verba, a well-known political scientist. And as a collective, we can move towards equality then in the U.S. economic, social, political systems, but also in global systems, which I haven't talked about nearly as much today. So to all of you, I would leave a challenge to encourage and indeed implore all of us to continue asking the challenging questions, exploring various techniques, and to find proposed solutions through dynamic lens of truly engaged pluralism and truly engaged scholarship. So with that, thank you, and I'd love to take any questions. Please.
Yes, there's a microphone on this, and we got up a little late, so we'll go about 10 minutes or so, Q&A, and then, yeah, so go ahead, please.
I'm old.
I am too.
No, you're a kid. I was a political science major at the University of Wisconsin in the 70s. Have you ever run for office?
No, I have not.
I did.
You need to talk to people.
I did.
Right.
I ran for office, and I don't know how this would touch folks who are actually running for office. I was an 18-year-old, and I went to the Republican National Convention in 1972. And I was among some of the most liberal people you would ever imagine. I was someone who was taken into friendship with John Sherman Cooper, a marvelous senator, Republican from Kentucky, who was one of the majority of Republicans who voted for both civil rights and voting rights. And a lot of people, including the old guy Joe Biden pointed out when he ran against Caleb Boggs, he had opposed Vietnam, he had voted for civil rights. But I found out you have to talk to people about real things. And as a political scientist, I reached a point of realizing if I wanted to change things, I'd become a priest in the Episcopal Church, which is where I am now. And you can have your own opinion. LBJ said about all the high-minded people who were supporting John F. Kennedy, they've never run for dog catcher. They didn't know what moves people, what causes people to respond, how to speak to people, and what political leadership is. And that concerns me. One more thought. It bugs me. I watch CNN because I'm sane. I watch it, and I want to hear all of these smart people, black and white and brown, whom I like. I want to hear them talk about how religion affects politics. They have no idea who all these people are voting for Trump because they have no idea about what kind of fundamentalism is behind all of these people. I keep thinking, why can't someone bring up what's going on with fundamentalism and left behind stuff when you've got 50 televangelists laying hands on President Trump and saying he's the anointed one? They're speaking to their people, and it seems like the eggheads have no idea what's going on. Please respond.
Sure, absolutely. The first one about, running for dog catcher and talking, sorry. The first one about talking to people out there, I actually think fits exactly with what I'm saying. Like, we've got to have community engaged scholarship so that ICER, that I mentioned, the Institute for Civically Engaged Research, that's exactly what their mission is to say, okay, we need to get out of behind our computer and get out there and talk to people. So we're asking the right questions, we're measuring the right things, we're having the impact we want to have. So I couldn't agree more on that.
I'm a flip top.
And then the second one on religion, I'm going to defer to Tobin and the other scholars because you're at the right place for SIU to think about religion and politics. I've been interested, I've done stuff on the gender gap. I'm really interested in the God gap of people voting and how those trend lines have changed over time. But I don't know enough about measuring the different denominations. That's why I need the smart people in here to be able to pull that off. But yes, watching how different groups have changed their partisanship and how religiosity has changed in the last decade is fascinating and complex, and something I know some of the faculty I was talking to here are working on, and super important question, but I'm going to make him answer that one. I don't know if you have anything to add on that today. Okay, but no, it's super important. I don't have the answers on religion, but it is hard to watch CNN or Fox News or whatever and say, why aren't you thinking about, Thank you. Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And the questions.
So I read a non-scholarly article by Dr. Imani Perry, who is a professor of African American history at Princeton, and I'll leave the mic, I'm good. And in it, she was referring to the shooting that happened in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago, and she brought up the idea that people are actively working for civic disengagement. Can you speak to how we overcome that? Like, I agree with everything you said, but what I find is that it's easy to convince people who are of the mind to understand more, but if we don't learn how to reach people who are actively working against this, I don't think we can be successful.
Right.
So do you have anything to help me with that?
Well, I think that the disengagement is very much related to the misinformation, too. And so I think understanding how, you can't, it used to be you can believe it when you see it, right? We can't believe it when we see it now. We can use ChatGPT, other things to create things, videos, and there are ways right now you can tell with like hand placement if it's a not real picture that was put together, but that'll be changed in 2 weeks, et cetera. So I see the disengagement and the misinformation as very much tied. So I am heartened by the scholars, communication scholars, for example, but also political scientists, et cetera, who are actively working on misinformation, because I think we have to get misinformation to then get at disengagement, because a lot of the misinformation and the pushing of, of why you shouldn't be engaged comes from the misinformation that is applied. And so I think that is a good thing. I also see a lot of attention both in private foundations and in the National Science Foundation, who are recognizing the importance of that. The computer scientists are recognizing the importance of that. We're seeing more people write and talk about, the data value and keeping it clean, and the misinformation. I'm not coming up with the right word right now, but so I do think that the disengagement is super important. It's happening, but I think a lot of that is very much tied to the misinformation and trying to figure out how we can communicate with people about what's happening, why it's happening, how it's happening, kind of the fundamentals of political science in our case, but in social science more generally, because so many of these topics are so intertwined with race, ethnicity, gender, et cetera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank the guy.
I'll try to go with a mic. Thank you for being here with us. My question is related to this engaged scholarship. You talked about, trying to support PhD students going into different fields, right? Industry, government, nonprofits, et cetera, academia. But I see that as an output. But when it comes to the input of graduate schools, it seems to me that prevalent, that mostly attention is given to actually academic skills. So, I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts, but I remember when I applied a year or two ago, nobody really was interested that much in my professional experience. So I want to hear from you, how does academia looks into, from your perspective, into, bringing in to its programs people from, government, from think tanks, from nonprofits, et cetera. I mean, MBA programs have precondition that you have, many of them at least, that you have to have professional experience.
Right.
Do you think that something like that would actually help, more community engaged scholarship, that incoming students have some experience?
I think it would. I doubt if it will ever be kind of a prerequisite in the social sciences. I guess one thing you said about bringing people to our departments, et cetera, I actually think it's our job to go out. So going to DC to talk to the people in the different agencies. If you're, say you want to study something on transportation, et cetera, it's going out there. It's interesting. Some of the conferences I find the most valuable now are the ones that are better at bringing in non-academics. Like American Political Science Association is what, 98% of us are academics? But if you go to like the Political Networks Conference, definitely not more than half. So there's government and industry people there, and I think they impact the substantive work that we have there too. I do think as we place more students outside of academia, and we're seeing the value of that will feed back into the admissions cycle. But I agree that on the admission side, we aren't doing what we need to be doing. I think many of our departments, David Lazar at Northeastern, for example, is really great at seeing the value and promoting that and bringing in alums who talk about careers in all of these different fields. We haven't changed the curriculum much, though. Like, writing a dissertation is still a pretty solo act, and that's not really what government, nonprofits, and industry, it's not how they work, really. And so we haven't changed a lot of that yet, either the curricular or the dissertation process, but I hope that we'll get better at that. The other thing that's been eye-opening for my own colleagues at OSU is when we lose candidates who are on the job market and they're like, yeah, I think I'm going to Pew, at the same time. And I think that's been eye-opening for them, and then seeing the success of their own students in these other fields. And frankly, even old folks like me now, like Burt Monroe, just recently left Penn State, tenured position, and went to Facebook, or Meta, whichever one. But I think that has been eye-opening too in terms of some career diversity, and helps in terms of the engagement then. So one of my students is now the top civilian in the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and so not the presidential appointee. And the kind of data, even if he's not co-authoring, like being able to come back and talk to students about the kind of data that he has, I think that helps. But we've got a long way to go, but I'm still quite optimistic. And consulting firms too. We have had a number of students come with consulting backgrounds, and I think faculty are beginning to see how successful they've been in graduate school, and I think that has helped as well. It's still certainly not a prerequisite, but I think more faculty on the admissions committee sees the value of that.
So I agreed with a lot of what you were saying, and I think it's so important that you're advocating for engaged scholarship and methodological pluralism. But at the same time, I see some of these developments that you presented as part of the golden age of social science as having a darker side. For instance, the explosion of data in a world post-Roe versus Wade is very dangerous, as period tracker apps are now collecting data that could prove that someone had an abortion, for example. And also, I mean, as a teacher in the classroom, I worry about the use of artificial intelligence to plagiarize essays, and for students to not get the full value of the education that we want to impart to them. So I was wondering if you could speak to how you see social scientists helping to address those darker sides of those same trends that also have positives that you were talking about.
Yeah. And I should say I'm by nature an optimist. Guilty there. But you're absolutely right. I'll take the easier one first, AI and teaching. I guess I would say we need to figure out how to teach students to use that. And it also takes us back to some fundamentals about teaching, because we want to be able to teach creativity, thinking outside the box, these sorts of things that can't be done with a bot, et cetera. And so, and there's certainly some scary sides even on the teaching. I also think, though, that as we worry about plagiarism, the plagiarism detection stuff is getting just as pretty rapidly. Like I remember Twitter kind of exploding with worries about ChatGPT, and then 3 days later saying, oh, okay, this is not the train wreck we thought it was. But I think we have to, just as back in the day, thinking, okay, what's it mean when you have a Google search? We no longer have to memorize as much because there's so much information at our fingertips. But how are we teaching students to use those tools? I think we're going to have to figure out in the classroom how to teach students to use these tools. So I'm not as worried about that one. There's tons of smart people thinking about it. I thought I'll just wait till they kind of figure that out, and then I'll read what we're supposed to do. But it is a fascinating topic, and lots of smart people thinking about it, lots of the associations working on it. The data privacy stuff, I think that is actually a perfect example of why we do need to be engaged. And data security, data privacy, at OSU, there's quite a few computer scientists and law school faculty collaborating on that issue, and have been getting some funding to further their research, because it is quite scary. And of course, there's all these sociologists are better at this than I think political scientists, of studying dark webs of drugs, dark webs of various things. So studying and understanding, but making sure it's not used in a negative way, I think, though, goes back to political science and civil society, and saying what kind of society do we want. All that is actually tied again to sociology and inequality, and what kind of society we want. So super big problem. And yes, you're absolutely right. I painted too rosy of an optimistic side there. But I think the fundamental point about social scientists needing to be engaged and talking about and teaching the value of debate and having research, I think is still the same endpoint, but you're exactly right to do a course correction on the way that I presented the golden age. You're right. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you, and thank you for this engagement. And Jen will be around. You know, if someone has a question, you're welcome to walk up. But let's do one last thank you.
Thank you.